Welcome, everybody.
Hello. So,
Man.
boy, do we have a topic and a half. This is your weirdo friend. They are an awesome college professor out in the
Oh,
Midwest. And my name is Ossiana. Uh, you might know me as the world's most risque political pundit, or somebody who's just been through a lot of trauma and likes to talk about it.
I mean, I think that is a fine way to establish yourself as a political commentator.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of a better approach, especially when often trauma and politics do intersect. So
Especially these days.
golly, yes, that is absolutely the case. These days, shit these days, right? I mean, just yeah. Should we introduce the topic a little bit and then kind of
Yeah,
go from there?
yeah.
Sweet. All right. So I was inspired by a recent publication by Descent and Bloom, who did a deep dive into the new invention of a phrase, toxic empathy, which is being astroturfed and dumped into the internet ways to try to shove the Overton window to make it seem as if having empathy and common decency is a weakness, which is obviously a lie in the sense that our collective survival as human beings has always depended on our empathy, which is why we have it. But there's some more. But wait, there's more. It's the ShamWow of fuckery, really. So, how would you like to?
Dude. But wait, there's more.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're gonna do the ShamWow guy, let me pretend to be him. Okay,
Okay.
but wait, there's more. Okay, no, but for real, like there is more to this because um anybody who's been like really involved in extreme right wing stuff, especially like if you're like me and you grew up cult adjacent, there's always been a certain level of shame tied to empathy. You're supposed to love the neighborhood adulteress, but you're supposed to also punish her. There's always been that certain level of you're supposed to show superficial empathy, but you're actually supposed to make their life worse. Otherwise, they won't learn. So, in a weird way, this whole toxic empathy thing, they've been slowly drumming it up since at least the 90s. Um, as a lot of people here might remember, back in the 2000s and even the 2010s, hearing people go, "Oh, those bleeding heart liberals, they'll, they'll bankrupt white people just to make a black person get a Gucci bag." That's the kind of stuff that, like, a lot of us who grew up in very conservative neighborhoods or areas or circles, we, like, quite literally grew up hearing that. Toxic empathy is just that being rebranded and kicked up a notch, really.
Yeah, for real. And I want to add that there's like to this element of DARVO. For those who have not been thoroughly gaslit and needed to figure out what this term means, it's deny, attack, reverse order of victim and offender. And one of the reasons why I am really wanting to highlight this here is because toxic empathy is as we see in headlines, and including a very offensive one in which my friend, someone that I actually went to graduate school with, was in a photo being pulled out of her car on a way to a doctor's office. She says, "Hey, I have a traumatic brain injury. Could you please not mess with me?" And she's 40 some years old, yanked out of her car. She blacks out, has to go to the hospital after ICE takes her away. And then they did a hit piece on her in the New York Post, and then they branded her face, her just going to the doctor and said, "Are young women's is young women's toxic empathy, the problem here, or the vanguard, or whatever the hell." I don't know what the headline was, but I'm deep in my feelings about this because they abused my friend, and who was on her way to a doctor's appointment, then used her queer brown likeness to kind of push forward this idea of toxic empathy that they are applying to women and femmes and anyone else that they sort of see as queer coded or whatever. But it is clearly a form of Darvo in the sense that it is a nice evasion of toxic masculinity, which is the actual problem at play here alongside white supremacy.
Yeah. I'm still realizing that that's your friend. Like, you know, I've had moments where my friends have ended up on the news, not for good reasons either, but mostly it's like stupid stuff like, you know, um usually something criminal they did or something like that, or something really stupid like the time that one of them decided to steal a coffee machine so that they could end up on World Star Hip Hop. Didn't really work out very well. Um But, like, it's weird because when you see those names that you recognize in the newspaper, it adds a certain level of realness. It adds a certain gut punch, and I actually remember hearing about your friend, and
Yeah,
please tell me that she's out of ICE's grip right now.
she is. Yes.
Dude, I mean, I can't even imagine what you must be going through seeing that, like, the level of fear, and it is interesting because they have been actively attacking women and children. And with women, they've gone so far as to be like, well, she deserved it because she's disrespectful. That's the kind of stuff that you hear from serial rapists. That's the kind of stuff you hear from serial killers. I mean, yes, all serial killers would be serial. Well, anyway, like that's a thing. And it's interesting that you bring in the Darvo thing because they are trying to make themselves look like the victims. Actually, quite recently, they had on Reddit a post where people discovered that there was a paid agitator from ICE pretending to be an anti ICE protester. They are
Yeah.
absolutely trying to victimize themselves. They can't stand the idea that people are actually calling them out on their shit. And it's interesting to watch this because we've seen so many attempts at them making pro ICE propaganda. It has been failing. But what's really kind of terrifying about this is that usually when there's a military junta trying to take over, it's usually just the government lying to people. People can tell that it's not them. This is the first time I've ever seen major news media, like actual like TV station and once esteemed institutions like CBS, Fox News, side with them and push their lies, even though they know it is factually incorrect.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Do I agree with you, and I think it is frightening. I mean, we know the New York Post is,
crap.
has always been a kind of rag for, it's a rag of ill repute, right? So we know that about the New York Post, but I do, yeah, we are seeing the capture of many of our news sources to the point that people are only learning about things on social media. And I think by and large, what I'm hearing, which is a little terrifying, is that many people are getting their news from Substack.
They
And
are.
part of that is because so much of the media has been captured, right? But yeah, there is a very specific expression of Darvo when you harm somebody and then you lie about them, you do violence to them, and then you put a hit piece out on them. And the hit piece, and this feels really important to me too, is that they point out that she is a Pakistani queer woman, a Pakistani American queer woman, and she that she the pointing out her diversity work as if that is admission of the pretext for what happened to her. And I am a little bit concerned, given what we know about ICE spying on organizers' phones, that we're all walking around with these smartphones that are just literally telling people who are legitimately stalking us where we are. And I don't think that it is an accident that many of the people that ISIS just so happened to pick up tend to be the people who are the bulwark of civil society, right? Like we've seen organizers, we've seen union workers being plucked up, and it's like, hmm. And it's not as if there isn't a tradition for this in the United States. This is something that happens, but
Yeah.
yeah, it is. And I think the news media has often repeated the lies of law enforcement in general uncritically, and I would also say even stuff coming out of the Pentagon, it's very rare that it's initially questioned. They just sort of like act like parrots instead of like journalists. But
Mhm.
now that every single institution in the United States is fucking captured in terms of there are Christian nationalists at the top. That doesn't mean that we're cooked. I fucking hate it when people say that. However, comma, it is definitely
Not a
I
good
don't even know what
sign.
the word is. Yeah. What do you think
Like,
about this sort of moment? Yeah.
so it's interesting because right now what we're seeing, it's not just DARVO. What they're doing is something that people who study genocide call dehumanization. Anybody who does not fit the white, cis, het, Christian mold is now going to be considered not less than human. And like, I grew up in a very conservative side of the world, even though like I was born in New York, raised in Jersey. And one of the things that I learned early on, at, like growing up in like one of the richest, whitest places in the state, is that a lot of people do not see people of color as citizens. And it's been this way since the 90s at least. And I say this because I've heard people at my university, um, and my university was also crazy expensive. I've heard them tell me that Black people need to go back to Africa, even like Black families who have been there for like 5, 6, 7, 8 generations. They're telling them they don't view them as citizens when we're dealing with this level of racism. It does not matter whether you're born here, it does not matter whether you've, you know, completely integrated. If you're a Chinese guy with a southern accent, they still don't see you as an American. And it's one of those things where I don't think that most people, especially people who grew up in left-leaning areas or who had left-leaning surroundings, fully grasp, like, and we're starting to see that face of America come forward in, like, a way that is very, very difficult to ignore, and the truth be told, we should not ignore it. The fact that they're doing this, the DARVO, it's part of the dehumanization process. That is actually a way to psychologically normalize genocide.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and I mean, I think that part of the reason why, there has been such a prohibition, in terms of, like, arresting those students very early on in the Trump regime, and talking about, what was happening in Palestine was in part because they didn't want us talking about what was happening there because they knew that they as our Palestinian neighbors told us, that they were battle testing, weapons and spyware on them to roll out on the rest of us, right?
Yeah,
The Lemkin Institute for Human Protection and I think it's Genocide Prevention and Human Protection. That's the whole name. The Lemkin Institute has been flagging, saying, "Hey, like this is a police state, and we're seeing the United States and white Christian nationalists targeting transgender people and immigrants for genocide." And this has been the case. And I think about my friend and the way that they just kind of rolled out, like they smeared her both as a brown woman and as a queer person, and also as the partner to a trans man. So they like literally included a tweet that says, "Oh, and she had a trans partner, trans man, and this is like the mental illness." So it's like you're absolutely right about just the full-fledged dehumanization. And this is part, and I'm saying this as a community college prof who wrote my dissertation on white Christian nationalism and Christian conservatism and their obsession with LGBTQ people and with people of color. And the thing is that most people, when I would talk about my work, they'd be like, "Oh, it's just spicy Christians." And it's like, no, they're not.
no.
they're an
No.
organization that our own government has identified as the greatest threat to our nation, and
Yeah.
now they have been literally, some of them removed from prison, but all of those militias that Trump said stand back and stand by, well, now they're in ICE, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that that's really important for people to understand, because I think that this fascist coup is trying to say, well, they're impeding law enforcement while they are being lawless, right?
Yeah.
And I think that they're tricking people, right, into thinking that that somehow to object the dehumanization of their neighbors is somehow illegal and thus immoral. And I think then when we make that calculus, it's really deadly. But I also think it's really deadly to think to sort of like dismiss Christian nationalism as just simply a form of conservative Christianity. The
It's
difference is
not.
that conservative Christians keep their shit to themselves. It's like, this is for me, this is my personal walk. White Christian nationalists are like, we would like to annihilate anybody who does not fit and create a religious ethno state. And that is what the religious, meaning like everything worshiping white masculinity. But yeah, thoughts.
So I actually agree with you 100%. And I don't think that most people understand that the Christian nationalist movement, not just white Christian nationalists, but just like the Christian nationalist movement as a whole, it is a highly organized political group. It is a political system. It has its own rules, it has its own bylaws. And a lot of it, like, it's not just about Christianity, it is a full culture in and of itself. And Nicole Terrell in the chat says the country was built on the dehumanization of the other, indigenous peoples, black people, women, etc. It keeps going on and on. This is correct. And the thing is that when you are a Christian nationalist with a white supremacist streak, which has been slowly like the undertone of everything in America for the past 300 years, you don't want to give that up when you're a white person. In fact, like one of the things that like your weirdo friend, I don't know which way you swing, but I am okay, same. I'm pansexual as all hell. And I also happen to be how shall I put this? I'm notorious for dating every single shade of the rainbow. So like I get all the remarks from angry white men. All the remarks from angry white men. And one thing I've learned is that a lot of these men, like, it's very strange how obsessive they get about their ability to own women. I
Mm.
mean, nobody thinks about black cock more than white men. I can assure you. And I'm not even talking about the gay guys. No. I'm not even talking about them. The straight guys. They get that scared of it. And it's funny because most people have not put two and two together as to why there's this Christian nationalist movement and why there's this obsession over making sure women don't date men of other races. It's very simple. It's because to them, women are a product. And if
Mm.
women are dating other women, that means that product is off the market. And how dare they? That woman is supposed to be allotted to some white guy. If a woman's dating a black guy, oh, that's kind of like theft, ain't it? The product is only for white guys. Why is she walking off there? She's not supposed to do that. It's broken. That's what
They
we're
do the same
seeing.
thing to trans men. Yeah, they do the same thing to trans men and say, and you're seeing this now with this whole that's gender mutilation to take puberty blockers, which literally just stop the development of secondary sex characteristics when you take them. And the moment that you stop, you get them back,
Hmm.
right? So, but the thing is that they see trans men and they see that as a threat in two ways. One, as my husband points out frequently, is who is a trans man, that like they don't want trans men taking their women, and then they see this violation, right, of, oh well, this kind of like protectiveness over masculinity, where it's like, how dare you do my job, right? So there's just it's all wrapped into one, right?
Exactly. And this plays into a lot of the DARVO that we're seeing because the guys who are acting this way, they genuinely do feel like they've been robbed of something.
Bless
Like
it.
As a feminist writer, I can't name how many times I've seen weird memes about I've seen memes talking to guys saying that their dream wife was aborted by a liberal. I'm not kidding.
I believe it.
I've seen memes about men being like, "Oh, in another life, that screeching liberal would be your conservative, submissive wife." Honey, that would not happen in anything because she probably would have been feeding you arsenic pie. Let's just be real here. Um, it's
Right.
it's all this feeling that they've been robbed from things, and the thing is that I actually talked to Frederick Pogue about this the other day. A lot of guys feel like they're entitled to all the rewards of being a man. But being a man in the traditional sense, like in the 1950s, most guys in these movements couldn't freaking hack it because they'd have to support a wife, they have to support some kids. If they wanted a divorce, too bad. No, they wouldn't. They would never be able to get hired again. If they wanted to run off with a mistress, no, they wouldn't. They'd never be able to live that down, and probably families would be chasing after him. Like all the stuff that they take for granted, which feminism gave them, including the right to divorce, including, believe it or not, the right to even have unprotected sex without like a condom and not have to worry about feeding the new little Timmy version 4.0. Like they
Right.
don't realize how much they've benefit. So what they're trying to come back to is a time that really actually did not exist. And they're on one hand they think that they're the victim and on the other hand they don't realize that they were the biggest recipients of benefits from diversity and feminism. Because guess what? If women ended up dating just based on a guy's salary like they used to, a lot of the guys who are single right now would stay single forever.
Right. Right. And I mean, I think that, what we are seeing here is Donald Trump and Russ Vogt creating a jobs program specifically for Christian nationalists, right? Where they've got this money to, be wife owning or whatever the fuck they want to talk about. But I think but I also think that Christian nationalists in particular have an astounding fragile masculinity.
Yeah,
And I say that because I think that they're also I think that there are a lot of men who understand that feminism benefits them in a lot of ways, not only vis-a-vis like reproductive freedom and the ability to say, you know what, one kid is enough, or we don't really want kids, right? But also like God, so much. I think that also, because we have lessened the taboos around sex and sexuality, that has also been a trickle up effect for men, because they have been able to explore aspects of their sexuality and also even expressing themselves, and being more confident in their bodies and also their ability to express their genders in a cornucopia of ways. And white Christian nationalists don't like that because they don't want anybody to have the off ramp. They want to say, this is the story and you have to obey. Otherwise, we are going to criminalize your very existence.
I agree. And I'm going to add something on to that, all right, so those of you who don't know, hi, my name is Ossiana. I'm a sex trafficking survivor, and I also grew up cult adjacent. So I know a lot about this topic. One of the smartest things that somebody's ever told me is if you control a person's sexuality, you control their very core. That is a part of a human being that is so intimate, that is so private, that if you have full control over that over another person, that means that you can basically get them to do whatever. That means that you're basically allowing them to bend and twist their own identity to suit
Mhm.
your needs. And ever since I figured that out and ever since I heard that, I started to look around and I saw so many strings. The weird strings, the weird hangups that they have on sexuality, the weird like attacks that ICE has, the way that they're acting aggrieved. It's because on one hand, they're acting out because they can't even figure out why they're so upset and why their masculinity is so fragile. And on the other hand, the very existence of women not being interested in them and the very existence of women being disgusted by them. So
Mm.
that's such a grievous affront to everything that they supposedly built up in this Christian hierarchy that it literally, like, I feel like it short circuits their brain.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that you see that they also it's not even well, you're right about I just want to go back to the point that you made about when you control a person's sexuality, you control every aspect of them. You control their destiny, you know?
Yeah,
And I think that, what, they don't realize is that when you debase other people, you also debase yourself, thus creating the very hangups that I believe that they have with regard to sexuality. They are some of the most self-hating people that
yeah.
I have ever met in my life, and they instead of actually sitting with that, they blow it through other people as if, the a complete fucking stranger is like the object is the object of their hatred. The amount of times that I have seen strangers on, so I cross post a lot of my stuff to YouTube, and the amount of hate that I get is just tremendous on every post. And they'll say stuff like, "Oh, this person with black glasses and a nose ring and this and that," and they're just, the whole thing is this person is speaking confidently, and their gender expression is not something that I desire. And boy, howdy, am I not here for your sexual gratification. Like, fuck you all the way. Like, I you can go fuck yourself. I am
I
not
mean,
here for that. Also, my glasses are green. Damn it.
I'm colorblind, but also I'm here for certain people's sexual gratification simply because I have a loyal fans, but they have to pay for it, and if I really get annoyed with them,
Real.
I'll just freaking block them.
Yeah. Yeah. But this idea that like we're that regardless of consent, that we exist for other people is, I think, a foundational sort of component, right,
It
of,
is.
Christian nationalism. Yeah, and it's, "Oh, yeah, Mar-a-Lago face, that's real." I actually read a piece on this, and I don't remember who wrote it, but they were talking about the sort of, ascendance of Mar-a-Lago face as this way for, uh, women who are part of Christian nationalism to adjust their visage in a way that is allegedly, meant to be desirable, but for me,
It's gross.
and thus, right, not intimidating. But that's the thing is that, like, we are getting into some body horror situations, like, some of the stuff I'm seeing is like, "Sweetheart, that" like, when I see, like, the before and after pictures of people who have just Botox
Yeah. Uh, hey,
I it it's grotesque. Even Kristi Noem, I mean, she just, like she gets, like her face gets fuller and fuller, or something, but in not a great way, like,
yeah.
she's becoming and I know that, Laura Loomer is a
Do
peak
you want to
example.
play a game?
Oh my god. There is a resemblance there, right?
I mean, look,
Yeah.
man, she needed to get some extra money during those filmings of Saw. The movie industry alone was not fixing it, and, like, not for nothing, but they can't keep coming out with the same Laura Loomer puppet as far as merch goes for that series. Look, man, it happens. I realize that she just upgraded her lipstick, but come on, man, you gotta give her a break. She's gotta get into politics. Don't worry, she's gonna be, like, coming around on that little tricycle that the puppet had, and it'll be fine. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I will razz on her.
No, 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 no. I mean, like, I think that when you betray your own people in a number of ways, right?
Yeah.
I think that you stand to receive ridicule, right? I think that that is an appropriate response. But yeah, like I'm always astounded that people are more upset that they think I should look some way that they want to be, and it's like, "Boo." like, I don't exist for you. But it's also this notion that is, I think, a hallmark of white supremacy, which is that everyone must be a copy of a copy of a copy. So they don't like that I'm existing on a screen and that I'm presenting myself with confidence, saying things that are probably above their heads, and then expressing my gender in a way that is very threatening to them because it's very obvious that I do not give a fuck about what about being femme of center or being received in some kind of way. And they hate that shit because even that is a threat to their
Existence.
masculinity. Yeah, yeah, and I also think that something that is under discussed about the murder of Renee Nicole Good, although I do see it talked about. I feel like uh Christopher Goldsmith talked about this, but like it was Renee Good's partner who is masculine of center, she was talking tough to an ICE officer, just, being like, "Hey, like, I'm pissed off at what you're doing." And, she mocked him, and then his response was to shoot her wife in the face 3 times. It was like, "My masculinity is threatened. I'm
Yeah,
angry that you are confident in space and that you can move through space and tell me that you are displeased with me, so I'm going to break you by murdering your wife in front of you."
that's basically how fragile masculinity works. And it's interesting that you brought up, the way that Laura Loomer betrayed her people, because that also kind of ties into it in a weird way. Most of Christian nationalism and this DARVO, remember, all of this is because these Christian people, Christian, and I use in quotes because there are some great Christian people out there who actually do follow the Bible, love their neighbor, love immigrants. But what we're talking about is something different. It's the Christian nationalist movement. Um, they're they have this aggrieved entitlement because whether they realize it or not, they've already sold their souls, and not to Jesus. They sold their souls to an industrial complex that is pretty much acting like a meat grinder. They've sold their souls into a world of martyrdom that was not ever meant for them. It was not supposed to happen. A loving God would make you feel happy, would want you to connect with people of different groups, would want you to bring forward peace and joy. What they got a bunch of capitalist grifters who are literally making blood money off of them. And the problem
Yes.
is that they I think a lot of them on the DL recognize that if they actually acknowledge that they sold their souls into this capitalist dystopian grift of the right wing, a lot of them will break because they're going to look back at all the horrible things that they did and they're going like, I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that. They're going to look in the mirror and they're going to be like, oh my God, I really am gay. I could have accidentally shot the love of my life during that Pulse shooting or whatever it was. There's a lot of people who, if a mirror is held up to their face, they will go ballistic. And no one is a better example of that, in my opinion, than Laura Loomer.
Hmm.
Uh, did you see the video they got of Laura when she was hitting on that one white nationalist dude?
No, no. Tell us about it.
Oh. Okay, like this was like a 3-minute long video. This white nationalist dude, I think his name was Marcos or something like that, or Markov. He was 18 years old, and like he had features like mine, like hyper Aryan, like pointy nose, blonde hair, even though mine's dyed. I don't think his was, which tells you like how pale he was. Like blue eyed, pale as pale as me, which is also kind of hard to do. And she was all over him, and she was like 36 when this happened, and she was like, oh yeah, so do you mind that I'm a Jew? Don't worry, I have the Ashkenazi Jewish intelligence. I got the Ashkenazi nose. And then she was like sitting there, she was like, I could have Aryan babies with you. And like this dude looked so unbelievably grossed out by her. And she was like pawing at him, and she was like, oh, most trad wives cheat on their husbands. I was like, well, yeah, well, I really like my girlfriend, thank you. I was sitting there, I was watching this, and it was like, it was so cringy to watch. Like, I realize I am cringy when I try to flirt with people, but she took it to a level where I felt viscerally uncomfortable, and I actually was like, could somebody please get an adult in there so that Laura Loomer stops petting the Nazi? Like, it was interesting, and it was so strange watching a woman who literally had a state position get so submissive and so self-loathing in front of a person.
Yes.
They don't show this to you on Fox News. And there's a reason that they don't. It's because a lot of the women in their audience will see themselves in her and they won't like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think a lot of these women are not only self-hating, but are also, grifting much I mean, much in the same way as you pointed out, that so much of Christian nationalism is rooted in the gospel of wealth, which is really just this capitalist grift, right? And which is rooted in a kind of racialized resentment around if you don't have a lot of money and if you don't have the life that you want, then you're outside of alignment with God and you've just become righteous and send us a check for $20, then you're on the path to salvation, right? And then it escalates from there. But there's such a grift, and the other, like when I think about what Charlie Kirk's wife, and also there are some politicians in Canada. I think Pierre Poilievre's wife it does the same trad wife grift circuit.
Ugh.
Because again, this is a global rise of white Christian nationalism, and or Christian nationalism imbued with white supremacy, and that you don't have to be a white person to cozy up to white supremacy, right? This happens all the time. But yeah, I just the way that Charlie Kirk's wife Erica Kirk uh is doing this whole women should stay at home, but absolutely my nanny is watching all of my kids while I basically turn my husband's assassination or murder into an income generating thing, and I go on talk circuits and tell women not to get jobs when this is obviously a fucking job. Like, it's just
Magda
astounding.
Magda Goebbels did it back in 1940. She was heralded as the Nazi Party's idea of a perfect German mother. She had 6 kids. She fucking hated her kids. She always
Don't
pawned
doubt
them
it.
off to Annie. She never really bonded with them. She was very interested in fashion. She worked behind the scenes as one of the Nazi Party's like leading propagandists. This is not a new grift. The whole idea of women staying at home and the like, that's actually meant to disempower because, if women start living on their own, men no longer get their supply of women. And it's it's actually very interesting to see the connections there because Germany, they tried to kind of turn Hitler into like a religious figure by pushing Teutonic Knights rather
Mm,
than Christianity. America is unique because America is the place where the prosperity gospel got got started. And for those of you who don't know, prosperity gospel is an American fundamentalist movement where pretty much they believe that if you are not sinning, you are wealthy and you're powerful and you're held in high esteem. That's just how God treats you. Um, Obviously, there's also roots in racism there because one of the earliest religions that we have in America, which was not, Native American, was Mormonism.
hmm.
Now, uh, show of hearts, do we have any ex-Mos in the chat? Show me some hearts.
We're
No?
waiting for your heart. And as we're waiting for your hearts, I also want to point out that the gospel of wealth was also rooted in the time of the Great Depression, which adds just an extra 1-2 punch of gaslighting. That this was literally built out of a time just like this, where
Social
fascists,
Darwinism.
yeah,
That's
crash the economy, and then they tell people that the reason why they're living in poverty is because of their own doing. Oh, we
and
got a
then
heart.
awesome. So I do see some ex-Mos, I guess. So, those of you who are not initiated into the world of Mormonism, because I've studied this at length simply because I find Mormons fascinating. Like, I want to poke one with a stick, but I realized that would probably be considered assault. Um, but like, anyway, so in the Mormon religion, originally, Brigham Young, who is the founder of Mormonism, said that he spoke to Jesus and that white people were seen as the most sinless on earth because of their white skin. They had black people, they called their dark skin and their dark features the mark of Cain. And
Mm,
they were basically said that if they were good Mormons, they were not even allowed in the Mormon church, black people, until like the 1970s or 1980s, which tells you how racist the Mormon religion is. It's still very much racist. Just because they allow black people in as converts does not mean that they are not treated as second class citizens. They were they were acting as like they're pretty much saying, since you have the mark of Cain, you're a born extra sinner or something like that. And that also ties into prosperity gospel because Mormonism, the entire Mormon church, literally has billions upon billions of dollars, a full portfolio, and people are expected to tithe, which means giving 10% of their income to the church, regardless of what happens. So, one thing's for certain, the prosperity gospel in there very much is alive. And there is that social Darwinism, there is that social hierarchy. And they do act as if somebody who's richer is more blessed. And if you're whiter, obviously you're welcome in the Mormon church. If you're darker, they pretty much just tell you to kick rocks without telling you to kick rocks. They might do that like Midwest thing or Southern thing where they're like, bless your heart. But aside from that, this is what most people don't understand is that I'm bringing up Mormonism and all this stuff just to prove 2 points. One, it's been ingrained in our society. Two, there's a reason why we keep hearing about Mormon influencers, why Mormon influencers are on TLC as the Real Housewives of Utah.
mm.
They're bringing that back. They're very subtly astroturfing it so that that becomes the cool mentality to have and the cool organization to join. The question is, are we dumb enough to buy it?
I mean, I really hope not. I mean, I think that it is very sad though to see this sort of resurgence of trad wives and also this attempt to create glamour or whatever around. It's just what. Here's my thing: if your faith requires you to be an influencer on social media, to do up your face, to get on TV, to sort of perform yourself. Um, that's not religious practice, right? That's
No,
not
it's grift.
yeah, it absolutely is. And I think about that a lot. Uh I don't know why I'm saying this, but I frequently find myself saying this. Like if you have to advertise. So for instance, I once lived in Johnsonville, North Carolina when I was teaching in Appalachian State, tiny little town in the holler. And there were not very many restaurants, but there was one that said on its marquee, "Best salad bar in the county." But what they didn't tell you is it was the only salad bar in the county. So my point here my point here is if you have and there was another time where, like, I just feel like every time also when I see a restaurant that says, uh, "Tasty food," I'm like, "If you have to advertise that shit, it tells me that maybe your food ain't so tasty." You know?
Nonsense. The strip club down the street from me that closed down for health violations said that their food was great, and I believe them.
Yeah. Oh, does your stomach though? No, but yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things that I think that I really want people to sort of like ungaslight themselves around, and I'm not sure about you, but I think that the other, and Hannah Arendt said this, that when when you start to see people pathologizing like empathy, that we are about to descend into brutality. But the thing is, it takes two to tango. It takes two to be gaslit, right? You have to actually participate in the gaslighting. And so you can refuse that logic and understand that the reason why any movement would ask you to shut off your emotions is because your emotions are actually the seat of your discernment. Otherwise, all you've got is just pure data. Your emotions are the thing that help you decide, oh, what is in alignment with my values? And that is the very thing they're pathologizing and trying to turn off so that they can maintain power and control. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree with you. It's interesting because if you take a look at almost every major cult movement that ended violently, and we're talking about the People's Temple, we're talking about the Charles Manson killings. I recently watched one about Heaven's Gate and like the one survivor that they left alive simply because of, sorry, I want to get better lighting, but there we go. It's gonna have to be a little bit pale blue. Um, the Heaven's Gate murders, all of them did the same formula because this is a well-known, well-practiced formula. They all focus on the bite model, which means that pretty much it's a form of control where they get you roped in, they get you invested, and then if you step out of line, they punish you, they threaten to excommunicate you. And all of all of the bite model, in order for it to work successfully, requires all of its like followers and all of the organization's devotees to clamp down on their empathy, because if they see somebody who they care about hurting, they have to override that in order to punish them. And in cults, the more violent the punishment, the more you're going to want to sit there, especially like in something like Warren Jeffs, where they would literally kick out family members, leave them on the side of the street and say, "You're never allowed back in." Like, that's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. And their family members had to go along with it. Otherwise, they would be next. So you have to kill the empathy that you have for your mother, your sister, your brother, your daughter, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. And that's why empathy is seen as so dangerous for these types of right wing, ultra culty groups. Empathy is the biggest danger to the right wing because the minute that you have empathy and your heart grows 3 times that day, that's when everything falls apart for their control. A person who is empathetic towards themselves is a danger to them. A person who is empathetic towards others is a danger to them because empathy requires personal accountability on both sides.
Yeah. 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 I'm just like letting that sink in because I'm thinking about the ways that um, you know, MAGA is has definitely done a very kind of similar type thing. But I don't know. I'm curious if you think that there are any seams that we can press on in ways that maybe MAGA's cult is weak. And I do think that there are people who are experiencing double thinking and or who have like left the cult.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like I think Trump relied on the carnival barker performance of cruelty as a joke, which is something that a lot of sadists do. They'll say it as a joke so that they can, do some sort of plausible deniability. But I think because the movement was sort of like dispersed, that maybe there are some seams that we can kind of play in or short circuit this attempt to sort of numb people. But I also, just as a side piece, want to say side piece. It's funny. Anyway, ah, jokes. I've got jokes. But like the other piece is that I think that they're also attempting to make other people, even empathetic people, go numb by this constant stream of brutality. They're trying to
Yeah.
literally put you into a freeze mode, which a lot of trauma survivors understand. You have to go numb to
Or
survive.
fawn.
Yes. Yes, or both at the same time, right? And so, like, I think that they are trying to, break people's sense of morality. That's what we talk about when we mention moral collapse, and it's really, really important that we do not descend into moral collapse because while Timothy Schneider says that shit about once the militias have guns, that the end is nigh, the actual end that is nigh is the moment we fall into moral collapse and
Yeah,
begin to participate. Yeah.
you're absolutely right on that, and it's interesting that you asked if there are some seams.
Yeah.
So, I can actually offer some expertise on that because, I myself was part of several organizations that encouraged me to kill off empathy, and one of them was so brutal that there was an open FBI case
Wow.
based on it. So, I watched this stuff happen in my life. And the one thing that I learned is that a lot of these people, they kind of have a nagging feeling that they're wrong.
Mm.
They don't want to believe they're wrong. And if they don't want to believe they're wrong, they're not going to allow themselves to believe they're wrong. The only thing that they are going to be able to empathize with is themselves after a
Hmm.
certain point. Every human being tends to self justify no matter what the situation is. So here's the interesting thing. Right now, Trump is doing something very stupid.
Shocking.
I know, right? If there was like a Sistine Chapel is stupid, this fucker made it. Um, like this dude, he is doing the one thing that he should not be doing. He's causing harm to his own voter base, and it's
Mhm.
causing harm in a way that he cannot push off onto other people. The
Yeah.
more that he has to own it, the more that we point out that he owns it, the more people are going to be able to empathize with themselves. The own hurt. And that's when they're going to start being able to empathize with others because they start to realize, hey, this dude is hurting me, which means that the other people who he hurt might not have deserved it. That's when they
Mhm.
start to question. When it comes to cult deprogramming, and I speak as somebody who grew up cult adjacent and who grew up, conservative and who grew up with all this other crap happening in their young adult life and teenage life and childhood, whatever. The only time that most people wake up and deconstruct and actually start to mend their things is when the cult leader starts to hurt them. That's when you see the highest dropout rate. Some people will never leave until the cult leader is dead. And
Yeah.
even then, they won't leave. That's what happened with some people from Heaven's Gate. Yes, there are survivors, or like one survivor that they left behind to talk to the aliens or something like that.
Well,
With the way that things are going, we've already started to see a lot of Trumpers quiet down their support.
yes.
We've already started to see people talk about regretting voting for Trump, though some have still not admitted that they'll vote Democrat next time. We've already started to see people realize that they've been taken for a ride. It is
Yeah.
only when ICE starts attacking the Midwest, which they're doing right now in Missouri,
And Ohio.
and Ohio was a red state,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Oh, yeah,
Well,
Ohio used to be a swing state. That's where I grew up. It's my home. Yeah, it was a purple state. It used to be a bellwether just like Indiana, and now it is just straight up red because we've got Christian nationalists who've captured the state house and just rat fucked the whole thing.
yeah. Well, that's going to be interesting to watch because the Christian nationalist movement is also currently collapsing, as is the megachurch movement.
Good.
Everything that we're doing right now, just like even you and I just talking, believe it or not, it's actually weakening the movement. The Christian nationalist movement was going strong. It was trendy. They had the Duggars with 19 kids and counting. They had people talking about, oh, be a trad wife. Look at me on Betty Butter Toast. Look at this bland orange crap that I call delicious food, even though I can't even recognize what the fuck it is. And people were eating it up. It was when the survivors started to talk. that things started to turn around because there are so many people, both those of us who grew up white nationalist, I'm not going to name names, but I know quite a few very personally, and those of us who grew up cult adjacent, or like my best friend who she grew up in a cult that currently actually has actual legitimate ties to Donald Trump and recently called for the execution of doctors who do trans surgeries. Um that's the level of like right wing I was raised in. Um Most of us who have gone through that kind of brainwashing, that kind of indoctrination, that kind of grooming, when we're cast out or punished to the point that we don't feel safe going back, or we feel like it's no longer good for us to go back, we end up feeling like it is our fault. We end up feeling alone. Nobody really talks about the isolation of, you know, disindoctrinating yourself, you know?
Yeah,
They don't talk about how lonely it is, how you can't talk to your fellow Trumpers and say, "Hey, I don't feel safe doing this. I don't wanna do this." Because they know that the beatings or whatever it is gonna be they're gonna get from their fellow Trumpers is going to make them really hurt. They can't talk about it to their church parishioners anymore because the church parishioners will sit there and go, "You are condemned by God for not listening to Trump." They
right.
can't talk about it to the other relatives who are QAnoners because the QAnoners might shoot their ass. They're stuck. And the fact that the internet is allowing us to find discourse, the fact that people now know, hey, that weird blue haired lady or that weird spiky blonde haired broad or whatever might actually have been a similar person to me. That's when it clicks and that's when they realize they're not alone. And that is the biggest change between, deconstructing a cult such as MAGA versus being semi forced and semi resigned to live that way until the end of your life, which, by the way, a fate worse than death for most of us.
Mm. Yeah, and often leads to death, as we've seen with some individuals that were, MAGA and were like anti-vax and then they died of that, or were anti-gun control and then died of that. Um, for example. And yeah, and there's something that you're saying that I feel as a survivor of childhood sexual assault, and also experiencing on top of that the cascading domestic abuse that usually circulates that is that I am seeing just this large amount of survivors of domestic abuse, of childhood sexual assault, of cults that are coming online and saying, listen, if you want to look at this rock, you need to turn it over and see what's underneath it. And I think one of the things that they miscalculated is how powerful people's stories are and how many abused people they left in their wake who have suddenly found their voices. And once one person speaks out and says something, for instance, just being able to be on screen and say, I am a childhood sexual assault survivor is something when you, like you said, when you experience some kind of harm, you believe that it's your fault. You believe that it is your shame to carry. But the moment that somebody steps out on a screen and says, I am a survivor, regardless of what that's your survive what it is that you're surviving, you create some sort of narrative space for people also to come to story and be like, you know what, me too. And I don't have to hold this inside. And it does something. And I think that it is going to be survivors who are the ones who end this shit.
Oh, absolutely. Like I'll say this before and I'll say this again. One of the biggest weakening factors for Christian nationalism and cults in general was the true crime boom that we saw in 2020.
Huh.
Like everybody was joking about like, oh my God, all these like suburban housewives, they want to hear about murderers and serial rapists, and oh my God, it's the scary cult thing. They don't realize why it's popular. It's because a lot of those women experience stuff like that. They're looking on how to keep themselves safe. They want to find out, like, okay, I want to not feel alone. Or they know people like that. Or they've had a tragedy that was like a horrible domestic thing, like the Chris Watts thing. And that just opened up such a huge can of worms. They can't put the worms back in the can. The worms are squiggling all over, and I love it. This is the only time you'll ever see me love worms.
Yeah, I'm also a little creeped out by worms too. And for real, I mean, this is an aside, but never mind. I'll just gonna put a pin in that and not share that because we both hate worms, and I'm not going to add a sensory thing that to add to but there's a part of worminess that I sometimes wonder, is it just my neurodivergence or do other people experience this too? But I will leave it to myself. But I also, I also dislike worms. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't even like the gummy worms, man. Like, the tactileness of them, they gross
Same,
me out, dude.
same,
Like, I'll eat
same.
them, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
can't
ew.
yeah, like, I can't even watch someone eat one. I'm just like, why? You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Jennifer Genevieve says, "I think it's primal." It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. I mean, like, I love worms in soil. You know that your soil is healthy when there are worms in it. However, comma, so, like, when I'm gardening, I'm like, "Right on, how you doing, buddy?" And I no, like, for real, like, I see him in the soil, and I'm like, "You're doing your job, well done." And then I just keep on going, but there's something for me, it is the smell of worms. I can actually smell worms, and it
Same.
is not it's so you know what I'm talking about. It's the worst for me after it rains. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Fuck." Because I think it's because 'cause they're everywhere, and then you can just smell them, and I'm like, "Oh, take a bath, friend." I don't know.
Yeah. No, like, Renee,
It's
there are
like,
not many snakes. Snakes are cute. I love my little note ropes.
"Aw,
Worms are
no, bro."
different.
Yeah, worms are a little different, and I wonder about the person that was like, "You know what would be a good candy for kids?" I mean, like, who thought of that, you know? Like, it's just so gnarly. Anyway, just so gross.
Exactly. I'm sorry. I'm hearing like some crunching and I'm trying to figure out what my cats are humping.
No,
One
that's real. That's real.
one of my cats, Monty, he seems to be a very frustrated boy because all he does is hump a pillow and hump his brother. And I'm just like, my brother in Christ, please don't do this while I'm like trying to podcast.
You know, our I so my husband and I used to have they recently passed a
I
year
am so
apart.
sorry.
Thank you. But they were definitely domestic partners. Um You know, so and my dog, it's so funny when we take him, inside from a walk, he gets so excited, the first thing he does is come inside and hump his dog bed, and I'm like, "Dude, what's this about?" But I'm not trying to yuck his yum, so but I feel you 'cause, mercifully, my dog is sleeping on the couch, but he could be, just dragging his bed right over here and being like, "Hey," 'cause he's an exhibitionist too. He loves, I mean, and no, again, not no shade, but he loves an audience. So his favorite thing to do is when there are people over, he's like, "Hey, I have this cool thing I wanna show you." And he starts humping his bed.
See, I understand that. My cats, they're perverts. Your dog is a pupvert.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Anywho,
Uh,
enough silliness for today. I hope y'all enjoyed our chat.
yes, same.
Um, dude, this
This
was
was
so
like
cool.
yeah, same, and anytime that you wanna come on this was our first conversation together, I hope we get to have other ones, but,
Yes.
yeah, thank you all for hanging out with us, as we talk about the complete fuckery of this idea of toxic empathy, which is absolute bullshit. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Don't don't allow them to fool you. Empathy is dangerous, but only for the bad guys.
that's it. Hold on to that, that's lovely. Empathy is dangerous, but only for the bad guys. Wow, is that a tagline? Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. And have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good
Bye.
evening. Good night.
Good night.